I've been waiting for someone brave enough to ask. Those 7 words changed everything. When Ethan Cole made a drunken joke proposal at a lakeside party, he expected laughter. What he got instead was a stone-cold, serious answer from Victoria Hale, a billionaire CEO he'd just met. No hesitation, no smile, just those words that turned a silly game into something terrifyingly real. This is the story of how a single father's throwaway joke became the most important question of his life, and how a woman who had everything discovered what she'd been missing all along. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels, and don't forget to hit that like button. Now, let's begin. The Friday evening air hung thick with humidity over Lake Meridian, that peculiar stillness that comes just before sunset when the world seems to hold its breath. Ethan Cole's Ford F-150 crunched over the gravel driveway of the lakeside rental house, its engine ticking as it cooled. In the back seat, 6-year-old Maya slept with her mouth slightly open, her favorite stuffed rabbit clutched against her chest, oblivious to the fact that her father's hands were still gripping the steering wheel, even though they'd stopped moving 5 minutes ago. Ethan exhaled slowly, staring at the sprawling cedar-sided house through the windshield. Warm light spilled from its windows, and he could already hear music and laughter drifting across the lawn. This was exactly the kind of thing he normally avoided. Corporate social gatherings, networking disguised as leisure, forced camaraderie with people from the office he barely knew outside of Monday morning meetings. But his coworker James had been persistent, almost annoyingly so. "Come on, man," James had said 3 weeks ago, leaning against Ethan's cubicle with that salesman grin of his. "You need this. When's the last time you did something that wasn't work or being a dad? No judgment, but you're turning into a hermit." Ethan had wanted to argue, to explain that his life was full enough without adding weekend retreats to the mix. Between his job as a logistics coordinator at Harmon Freight, Maya's school schedule, soccer practice, piano lessons she'd begged for, then immediately regretted, the endless cycle of laundry and grocery shopping and parent-teacher conferences, there simply wasn't room for anything else. But James had played his trump card. "Maya can come too. The house is huge. There's a dock, kayaks, a fire pit. She'll love it. And honestly, brother, you look exhausted, like Walking Dead exhausted. 2 days by a lake, fresh air, actual sleep. What's the harm?" So here he was, parked outside a house that probably cost more for one weekend than he paid in rent for an entire month, about to make small talk with people who would forget his name by Monday. He glanced in the rearview mirror at Maya's sleeping face. At least she'd have fun. That's what mattered. "All right, kiddo," he whispered, carefully opening the back door and unbuckling her seatbelt. She stirred but didn't wake as he lifted her out, her small arms automatically wrapping around his neck in that instinctive way children have. He grabbed her overnight bag with his free hand and headed toward the house. The front door opened before he could knock. James appeared, already holding a beer, his face flushed with early evening drinking. "Ethan, you made it! I was starting to think you'd bail." He stepped aside, gesturing grandly. "Welcome to paradise, my friend. Come in, come in. Who's this little angel?" "Maya. She's exhausted from the drive." "Poor thing. Second door on the right upstairs, that's the kids' room. We've got like 4 other children here, so she'll have company tomorrow. There's a portable crib already set up if you need it." Ethan nodded his thanks and climbed the stairs, his footsteps muffled by thick carpet. The house was even more impressive inside. Vaulted ceilings, exposed beams, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake. Definitely not the kind of place he belonged. The kids' room was perfect, already transformed into a miniature wonderland with sleeping bags, stuffed animals, and a nightlight casting stars across the ceiling. He laid Maya down on one of the twin beds, pulled off her shoes, and covered her with a blanket he'd brought from home. She mumbled something unintelligible and rolled onto her side. "Sleep tight, sweetheart," he whispered, kissing her forehead. "I'll check on you in a bit." Downstairs, the party was in full swing. Ethan counted maybe 15 people scattered between the living room and the back deck. He recognized a few faces from work. Karen from accounting, Mike from sales, that new guy in IT whose name he could never remember. Others were strangers, probably friends of friends or plus ones. James materialized beside him with a beer. "Here, you look like you need this." "I'm good, thanks. Driving tomorrow." "Ethan, You're staying here. The whole point is to relax. One beer won't kill you. Ethan took the bottle, more to end the conversation than anything else. The condensation felt good against his palm. He took a small sip and let James guide him toward the back deck where a fire pit crackled, sending orange sparks spiraling into the darkening sky. That's when he first saw her. She was sitting slightly apart from the main group, in one of the Adirondack chairs positioned near the dock's edge. The firelight caught her profile. Sharp cheekbones, dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, an expression of careful neutrality that suggested she was present but not entirely engaged. She wore jeans and a simple black sweater, nothing flashy, but there was something about the way she held herself that commanded attention without asking for it. "Who's that?" Ethan asked quietly. James followed his gaze and his eyebrows shot up. "Oh man, that's Victoria Hale. She's like a big deal, tech CEO. Her company just raised $100 million or something insane like that. Angela from HR knows her somehow. They went to college together. She invited her last minute. She doesn't look like she's having much fun. Yeah, well, she's probably thinking about quarterly earnings or whatever rich people think about." James clapped him on the shoulder. "Come on, let's join the fire, get you socialized." The group around the fire pit was engaged in that particular kind of animated conversation that comes from mixing alcohol, the outdoors, and people who don't know each other well enough to be genuine. Ethan found a spot on one of the log benches and nursed his beer, content to observe. Victoria remained in her chair by the dock, checking her phone occasionally but mostly staring out at the water. Ethan found his attention drifting back to her repeatedly. There was something almost magnetic about her separateness, the way she seemed perfectly comfortable being alone in a crowd. All right, everyone," Karen suddenly announced, standing up with theatrical flair. She'd clearly had several drinks. "I've got a game we're playing. It's called Most Likely To, and before you groan, it's fun, I promise." A chorus of good-natured protests rose up, but Karen was undeterred. "Here's how it works. I name a scenario and everyone points to who they think fits it best. Whoever gets the most points has to take a drink. Simple. Fun. Let's go." "Most likely to become a millionaire?" someone called out. All fingers immediately pointed toward Victoria, who glanced up from her phone with a slight smile. "Already there. Next question." The group laughed, and Ethan noticed her expression soften just slightly. Maybe she wasn't as disconnected as he'd thought. The game continued, growing progressively sillier as the drinks flowed. Most likely to survive a zombie apocalypse. Most likely to accidentally adopt 10 cats. Most likely to cry at a commercial. Ethan found himself relaxing despite his initial resistance, the beer warming his chest, the fire crackling pleasantly. Then Karen, swaying slightly, pointed at the group with a mischievous grin. Okay. Here's a good one. Most likely to get married next." A moment of chaos as everyone pointed in different directions. But when the dust settled, Ethan noticed with growing horror that at least 7 people were pointing directly at him, and another 5 were pointing at Victoria. "What? Why me?" Ethan protested. "Because you're stable," James declared. "Single dad, good job, responsible. You're like marriage material personified. That's the worst reasoning I've ever heard. And Victoria, because let's be real," Angela added, "you're not getting any younger, girl. Time to settle down and make some genius babies." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "I'm 30, not 60, Angela." "Exactly, prime time." Someone else, Ethan couldn't see who in the flickering darkness, shouted out, "Hey, they're both single. They should just marry each other." The suggestion was met with raucous laughter and cheering. Ethan felt his face heat up, grateful for the darkness that hid his embarrassment. He glanced over at Victoria, expecting to see annoyance or discomfort. Instead, she was looking directly at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. The group was chanting now, childish and drunk. "Do it! Do it! Do it!" Ethan held up his hands in surrender, playing along with what was clearly just a joke. He stood up with exaggerated formality, walked over to where Victoria sat, and dropped to one knee in a mockery of a proposal. The group went wild. All right, he said, projecting his voice over the laughter. He looked up at Victoria, expecting her to be laughing too. "How about it then? Will you marry me?" He delivered the line with perfect comedic timing, even adding a little flourish with his hand. It was absurd. Ridiculous. A complete stranger. A woman so far out of his league, they weren't even playing the same sport, in front of a dozen drunk people who would forget this entire exchange by tomorrow. The laughter continued around them, but Ethan suddenly became aware that Victoria wasn't laughing at all. She was looking at him with an intensity that made something in his chest constrict. Her dark eyes reflected the firelight, and there was no humor in them. No mockery. No playful rejection forming on her lips. Instead, she leaned forward slightly, her voice cutting through the noise with perfect clarity. "I've been waiting for someone brave enough to ask." The laughter died so quickly, it was like someone had flipped a switch. Ethan's smile froze on his face. Around them, confused silence spread like ripples on water. What?" Ethan managed. Victoria stood up smoothly, her expression never wavering. She wasn't smiling, she wasn't joking. She looked at him like she'd just been asked the most important question of her life, and had given her honest answer. "I said yes," she repeated, quieter this time. Then, before Ethan could process what was happening, she added, "Can we talk? Privately?" Ethan's mind was reeling. He was vaguely aware of the stunned faces around the fire, of James's mouth hanging open, of Karen's delighted gasp. But mostly he was aware of Victoria's hand extended toward him, waiting. Yeah, sure. Okay." He took her hand. Her grip was firm and cool, and let her lead him away from the fire, down the dock toward the water's edge. Behind them, he could hear the group erupting into shocked whispers and speculation. The dock extended about 30 feet over the lake, ending in a small platform with built-in benches. Victoria walked all the way to the end before releasing his hand and turning to face him. The sunset had nearly completed its descent, leaving only a thin band of orange along the horizon. The water was dark as oil, perfectly still. "Okay," Ethan said, his heart hammering. "What just happened back there?" Victoria crossed her arms, not defensively, but like she was trying to hold something in. "I'm sorry if I made things awkward." "Awkward? I was joking. You know that, right? That whole thing was a joke." "I know." She looked out on the water, her profile outlined against the fading light. But sometimes the best truths come disguised as jokes. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, completely lost. "Victoria, I don't even know you. We've never even spoken before tonight." "I know that too." She finally looked at him again, and there was something vulnerable in her expression that caught him off guard. "Can I tell you something? And you promise not to think I'm completely insane?" Sure." She took a breath. "I've spent the last 8 years building my company. 80-hour weeks, constant travel, endless meetings with investors and board members and clients. I've sacrificed relationships, friendships, sleep, health, everything to make it successful. And it worked. By every conventional measure, I've won. I'm wealthy. I'm respected in my industry. I've accomplished things most people only dream about." "That's impressive," Ethan offered, still utterly confused about where this was going. "It is, and it's also hollow." She laughed, but there was no joy in it. "I'm 30 years old, and I can't remember the last time I had a conversation that wasn't about market share or quarterly projections. I can't remember the last time someone looked at me and saw a person instead of a business opportunity. I can't remember the last time I felt connected to anything real." Ethan shifted his weight, his initial panic giving way to something else. Concern, maybe. "Okay, but what does that have to do with earlier tonight? Before you arrived, I was sitting by the dock thinking about leaving, just driving back to the city and spending the weekend working like I always do. Then you pulled up with your daughter." She smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. "I watched you carry her inside, the way you held her, so careful, the way you pulled her blanket up under her chin, the way you kissed her forehead before you came back down. It was the most genuine thing I've seen in months." Ethan felt his throat tighten. "She's my whole world." "I could tell. And then you came out here and you were so clearly uncomfortable, but you stayed because someone convinced you it would be good for you. You nursed one beer for an hour. You laughed at jokes even when they weren't funny. You were kind to everyone even though you clearly wanted to be back upstairs with your daughter." She paused. "And then they made you play that stupid game and you went along with it. You made everyone laugh. You were brave enough to be ridiculous. I don't understand what you're saying. I'm saying that when you asked me that question, even as a joke, something in me recognized it, recognized you. Here was someone real, someone genuine, someone who knows what matters. She took a step closer. I know this sounds crazy. I know you think I've lost my mind, but I've spent 8 years making calculated decisions, playing it safe, following the smart path. And it's made me successful and miserable. So when you asked me to marry you, even as a joke, I thought, what if I just said yes? What if instead of overthinking it, analyzing it, risk assessing it, I just took a leap? Ethan stared at her, his mind struggling to process this flood of honesty from a woman he'd known for less than 2 hours. You can't be serious. I'm not saying we actually get married tomorrow, Victoria said quickly. I'm not that impulsive. I'm saying, what if we explored the possibility? What if we spent time together and saw where it goes? What if instead of dismissing this as a joke, we treat it as an opportunity? An opportunity for what? For something real, something that isn't carefully planned or strategically advantageous, something that just is. The lake water lapped gently against the dock posts. Somewhere in the distance, a nightbird called out. Ethan could still hear the murmur of voices from the fire, but they seemed impossibly far away. Victoria, I'm a logistics coordinator making $52,000 a year. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood where the biggest excitement is when someone's lawn gnome gets stolen. I spend my weekends at soccer fields and grocery stores. My life is the definition of ordinary. Good, she said simply. I've had extraordinary. It's overrated. You don't know what you're saying, don't I? She moved closer, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something subtle and expensive. Let me ask you something, Ethan. When's the last time you took a risk? When's the last time you did something that terrified you? He wanted to say never, but that wasn't true. When I decided to raise Maya on my own, her mother left when she was 8 months old, just left, said she couldn't handle it. I was 26, broke, terrified out of my mind. Everyone told me to give her up, that I couldn't do it alone. But I did it anyway. Victoria's expression softened. And was it worth it? Every second. Then you already know how to be brave. You already know how to take a leap when it matters. She reached out and touched his arm lightly. I'm not asking you to decide anything tonight. I'm just asking you not to dismiss this completely. Think about it. Consider the possibility. That's all. Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, and saw past the CEO veneer to something deeper. Fear, hope, loneliness, courage, all mixed together in a way he recognized because he'd felt it himself. This wasn't some rich woman's whim. This was someone desperate for something authentic, reaching out in the only way she knew how. Okay, he heard himself say. I'll think about it. The smile that broke across her face was radiant. Really? Really? But no promises. This is still absolutely insane. The best things usually are. She squeezed his arm once, then released it. We should probably head back before they send a search party. They walked back up the dock together, and Ethan was acutely aware of the space between them, not touching, but somehow connected. As they approached the fire, every face turned toward them with barely concealed curiosity. So? James called out. What's the verdict? Are we planning a wedding? Very funny, Ethan replied, reclaiming his spot on the bench. We just talked, like adults. Boring, Karen declared, but she was grinning. I wanted drama. Plenty of drama in my life already, thanks, Ethan said, and the group laughed. The conversation moved on to other topics, but Ethan noticed Victoria had taken a seat closer to the fire now, more integrated with the group. Every so often, their eyes would meet across the flames, and something unspoken would pass between them. Around 11, Ethan excused himself to check on Maya. She was still sound asleep, her rabbit now on the floor beside the bed. He picked it up and tucked it back under her arm, his mind churning with everything that had happened in the last few hours. What was he even considering? A relationship with a woman who lived in a completely different world? Someone whose yearly salary probably had more zeros than his lifetime earnings? It was absurd. Impossible. Completely irrational. But then again, so was raising a child alone at 26. So was building a life from nothing when everything seemed stacked against you. He'd done impossible things before. He sat on the edge of Maya's bed, watching her chest rise and fall with steady breaths. "What do you think, kiddo?" he whispered. "Am I losing my mind?" Maya, of course, didn't answer. But in the peaceful silence of the room, Ethan felt something shift inside him. Maybe it was the beer. Maybe it was the strangeness of the evening. Maybe it was just exhaustion finally catching up with him. Or maybe it was the first stirring of something he hadn't felt in years. Possibility. When he returned downstairs, Victoria was standing on the deck, alone again, looking out at the dark water. He hesitated, then walked over to join her. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked without turning around. "Checking on Maya. She's out cold." He leaned against the railing beside her. "This is a nice place." "It is. Peaceful." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the kind of silence that usually takes months to develop between two people. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan said finally. "Anything." "Why me? I mean, really. You could have anyone, someone successful, someone in your world, someone who wouldn't be so out of place." Victoria turned to look at him, and in the dim light from the house, her expression was impossibly gentle. "Because everyone in my world wants something from me. They want access, connections, opportunities. They see Victoria Hale, CEO, not Victoria person." She paused. "But you? You didn't even know who I was. When you made that joke proposal, you saw just another person at a party. That's rarer than you think. That's a pretty low bar. You'd be surprised." She smiled. "Besides, I watched how you are with your daughter, how you talk about her. A person who can love that deeply, that selflessly, that's someone worth knowing. That's someone worth taking a risk on." Ethan felt something warm spread through his chest. "You're very good at saying the right thing." "I mean every word." She straightened up. "But I should let you get some sleep. We can talk more tomorrow if you want. No pressure." "Victoria?" She paused, halfway to the door. "Thank you. For being honest, for being brave enough to say what you were thinking." Her smile could have lit up the entire lake. "Thank you for not running away screaming." After she disappeared inside, Ethan remained on the deck for a long time, staring up at the stars scattered across the clear night sky. Somewhere in the house, people were laughing, music was playing, the party continuing without him. But out here in the quiet, with only the lake and the stars for company, Ethan Cole made a decision. It might be crazy. It might be the biggest mistake of his life. But Victoria was right about one thing. He knew how to be brave when it mattered. And something told him this mattered more than anything had in a very long time. Inside the house, in her temporary bedroom on the second floor, Victoria Hale sat on the edge of her bed with her phone in her hands, staring at the screen without really seeing it. Her heart was racing, adrenaline still coursing through her veins from the conversation on the dock. What had she done? She'd built her entire career on careful planning, strategic thinking, calculated risks. She'd never made a major decision based on impulse or emotion. And yet tonight she'd essentially proposed a relationship to a complete stranger based on nothing but instinct and a desperate hunger for something authentic. It was madness. It was terrifying. It was the most alive she'd felt in years. Her phone buzzed with an email notification, something from her assistant about Monday's board meeting. She silenced it without reading. For once, work could wait. The company could survive a weekend without her. The world would keep turning. She lay back on the bed, still fully dressed, and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow morning, in the harsh light of day, this would probably all seem like a terrible idea. Ethan would politely distance himself, she'd drive back to the city, and life would continue exactly as before. But there was a chance, a small, fragile, beautiful chance, that it wouldn't. That something genuine might actually grow from this strange beginning. That she might actually find what she'd been looking for without even knowing she was searching. Victoria closed her eyes and let herself imagine it. Sunday morning breakfast, a child's laughter filling a home, someone to talk to about something other than profit margins. A real life, not just a successful one. The image made her chest ache with longing. In the room across the hall, Ethan was lying awake too, his mind spinning through 1,000 different scenarios, each one more unlikely than the last. But somewhere in all that noise, one thought kept rising to the surface, clear and persistent. What if this is exactly what both of us need? Outside, the lake continued its eternal rhythm, waves lapping against the shore, stars reflecting on dark water. The fire pit burned down to embers, casting long shadows across the dock where two strangers had stood and spoken truths that would change everything. And in the quiet of the night, possibility hung in the air like smoke, waiting to see which way the wind would blow. Morning arrived with cruel brightness, sunlight streaming through the windows of the lakeside house and pulling Ethan from a restless sleep he barely remembered falling into. For a moment he lay disoriented in the unfamiliar guest room, trying to piece together why his heart was racing before his eyes were fully open. Then it all came flooding back. The fire, the joke. Victoria's face in the firelight, completely serious, saying those impossible words. "Oh no," he muttered into his pillow. That actually happened. A soft knock on his door made him sit up quickly. "Yeah? Daddy?" Maya's voice came through, small and uncertain. "Are you awake?" "Come in, sweetheart." The door opened and his daughter appeared, still in her pajamas, her hair a tangled mess around her face. She was clutching her rabbit and looking unusually shy. "There's a lot of people downstairs," she said, "and they're loud." Ethan checked his phone. 7:30. Of course there were morning people here. He ran a hand over his face, feeling the stubble there, and tried to shake off the fog of too little sleep and too much thinking. "Give me 5 minutes to get dressed, okay? Then we'll go down together." Maya nodded and climbed onto his bed, settling in to wait. As Ethan pulled on jeans and a clean shirt, he watched her in the mirror. She was swinging her legs, humming tunelessly, completely oblivious to the fact that her father's world had tilted sideways last night. What was he supposed to do now? Pretend nothing happened? Avoid Victoria for the rest of the weekend? Actually have a conversation about the insane proposition she'd made? "Okay, kiddo, ready for breakfast?" The main floor was indeed full of activity. James was making pancakes in the massive kitchen, flipping them with theatrical flair for an audience of sleepy-eyed children. Karen was pouring coffee with the careful movements of someone fighting a hangover. Several people Ethan didn't recognize were scattered around the living room, and through the windows he could see a few early risers already out on the dock. Victoria was nowhere to be seen. "Ethan, my man," James called out, waving a spatula. "Pancakes? We've got chocolate chip or blueberry. Maya, what'll it be?" Maya immediately perked up. "Chocolate chip, please." "A girl after my own heart, coming right up." As Maya joined the other children at the long dining table, Ethan accepted a mug of coffee from Karen, who gave him a knowing smirk. "So," she said, drawing out the word. "Quite a night, huh?" "Just a silly game," Ethan replied, keeping his voice neutral. "People were drunk." "Uh-huh. And that very serious conversation you two had on the dock? Also silly?" "We just talked, Karen." "Right, sure. Totally normal to have intense private conversations with gorgeous CEOs you just met." She patted his arm. "I'm just saying, if you need any advice on dating someone way out of your league, I'm here." "Thanks, but there's no dating happening." "Whatever you say." She winked and drifted away, leaving Ethan to wonder how much of last night's weirdness had become morning gossip. He was halfway through his coffee when Victoria appeared on the stairs. She'd changed into running clothes, sleek black leggings and a fitted jacket, and her hair was pulled back in a high ponytail. She looked like she'd stepped out of an athletic wear commercial, all clean lines and effortless grace. Their eyes met across the room. She gave him a small smile, uncertain, testing the waters. Ethan found himself smiling back before he could think better of it. "Morning jog?" James called out. "There's a trail around the lake, about 3 miles. "Perfect," Victoria said. She grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge, and as she passed the table where Maya sat, she paused. "Those pancakes look amazing." Maya looked up, syrup on her chin. "They're really good. Do you want some?" "Maybe after my run. Save me a chocolate chip one?" "Okay." Maya beamed, and Victoria's smile widened before she headed out the back door. Ethan watched through the window as she stretched on the deck, then took off down the path that wound around the lake's edge. Even her running form was graceful, efficient, controlled. "Daddy, you're staring!" Maya announced loudly, enough that several people turned to look. Heat crept up Ethan's neck. "Eat your pancakes." The morning passed in a blur of activity. The kids were herded outside for a supervised swim. The lake was shallow near the shore and warm despite the early hour. Ethan sat on the dock with the other parents, ostensibly watching for safety, but mostly lost in his own thoughts. Victoria returned from her run just as the swimming session was ending. Her face flushed and her breathing elevated but not labored. She'd clearly meant it when she said 3 miles. Ethan couldn't remember the last time he'd run anywhere that wasn't chasing Maya through a parking lot. "How was it?" he found himself asking as she toweled off on the deck. "Beautiful. There's a spot about halfway around where you can see the whole lake. It's perfect." She glanced at Maya, who was shrieking with delight as another child splashed her. "She's having fun." "Yeah, she loves the water. We don't get to do this kind of thing often." "Why not?" The question was simple, but it carried weight. Ethan shrugged. "Time, mostly. Money. The nearest beach is 2 hours away, and weekends are usually full of errands and catching up on everything I couldn't do during the week." Victoria nodded slowly, like she was filing this information away. "That sounds exhausting." "It is what it is. Does it have to be?" Before Ethan could answer, Maya came running up, dripping water everywhere. "Daddy, can we go kayaking? James said there's kayaks and he'll help us." "Maybe later, sweetheart. Let's get you dried off first." "But I want to go now." "Maya." "I could take her," Victoria offered. The words came out quickly, almost nervously. "I mean, if that's okay with you, I kayak a lot. Well, I used to. Before work took over everything." Maya's eyes went wide. "Really? Can I, Daddy, please?" Ethan hesitated. This felt significant somehow, like a test he hadn't studied for. But Maya was looking at him with those pleading eyes that always undid him, and Victoria's expression was carefully neutral, giving him an out if he wanted it. "You're sure?" he asked Victoria. "Completely. We'll stay close to shore, 15 minutes max." "Okay. But life jacket, Maya. No arguments." "Yay!" Maya was already running toward the kayak rack, leaving wet footprints on the dock. Victoria started to follow, then paused. "Ethan, thank you for trusting me. Don't make me regret it." Her smile was soft. "I won't." He watched from the shore as Victoria fitted Maya with a life jacket, patiently adjusting the straps and explaining how to hold the paddle. They took a bright yellow 2-person kayak, Victoria in the back providing power and steering while Maya helped from the front seat. Her small paddle splashed more than it propelled, but Victoria didn't seem to mind. James appeared beside Ethan, following his gaze. "She's good with kids." "Seems like it." "You know what's funny? Angela told me Victoria's never even mentioned wanting kids. Said she was always completely focused on her career, never talked about marriage or family, or any of that traditional stuff." Ethan frowned. So it's interesting that she's out there now, voluntarily spending time with a 6-year-old on her vacation weekend. People change, I guess. Or maybe they just need the right reason to. Before Ethan could respond, James clapped him on the back and wandered off, leaving him alone with that observation. Out on the water, he could hear Maya's laughter carrying across the surface. Victoria was pointing at something. A bird, maybe. Or a fish. And Maya was leaning dangerously to one side to see. Victoria's hand immediately went to steady her, casual and automatic, the kind of protective gesture that came from instinct rather than instruction. Something in Ethan's chest tightened. When they returned 15 minutes later, as promised, Maya was chattering non-stop. "And we saw a turtle, a real turtle, swimming. And Victoria said there's probably fish under the dock right now, and maybe tomorrow we can see if we can spot them. And did you know kayaks were invented by indigenous people thousands of years ago? Victoria told me." "Sounds like you learned a lot," Ethan said, helping her out of the life jacket. "Victoria's really smart, Daddy, and she's nice. I like her." Over Maya's head, Victoria's eyes met Ethan's. There was something vulnerable in her expression, like his daughter's approval mattered more than she wanted to admit. "I like her too," Ethan said quietly. The afternoon unfolded with lazy summer ease. Lunch was a chaotic affair of sandwiches and chips, followed by an impromptu volleyball game on the lawn that Ethan was voluntold into joining. Victoria played on the opposite team, and he tried very hard not to notice how athletic she was, how her competitive streak emerged in flashes of fierce concentration when she went for a spike. His team lost spectacularly, but he didn't care. As the sun started its descent toward evening, People began migrating back toward the house for showers and warmer clothes. Ethan found himself alone on the deck, watching the lake turn gold in the dying light. "Mind if I join you?" He turned to find Victoria standing in the doorway, her hair still damp from a shower, wearing jeans and a soft gray sweater. "It's a free deck." She settled into the chair next to his, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. The silence felt different from last night, less charged, more comfortable. "Maya had fun today," Victoria said finally. "Yeah, she did. Thank you for that. The kayaking, the turtle, all of it." "I had fun too. More than I've had in a long time, actually." Ethan glanced at her. "Really? More fun than closing million-dollar deals and conquering the business world?" "Significantly more." She pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them in a gesture that made her look younger, more uncertain. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do you think I'm crazy for what I said last night?" Ethan considered the question carefully. "Honestly? A little bit, yeah. But I've been thinking about it all day, and I think maybe crazy isn't always bad." "What do you mean?" "I mean that I spent 6 years playing it safe, building a stable life, following all the rules, doing everything the responsible way. And it's been good. I have Maya, I have a job, we get by. But sometimes I wonder if I've been so focused on not making mistakes that I've stopped taking any chances at all." Victoria was watching him intently. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe you're on to something. Maybe sometimes the smart move is to do something that doesn't make sense on paper." He paused, gathering courage. "I'd like to get to know you better. Really know you, not just small talk at a party. See if this thing, whatever it is, might actually be something." The smile that spread across Victoria's face was like sunrise. "Really? Really? But we do this slow, okay? No rushing into anything. We date like normal people. Coffee, maybe dinner, see how it goes." "I can do slow." She hesitated. "Although I should warn you, I'm not great at normal dating. My schedule is insane, and I'm not always good at separating work from personal life. And I should warn you that I come as a package deal. Maya is my priority, always. If this is going to work, you need to be okay with that. I wouldn't want it any other way." They shook hands, formal and slightly ridiculous, sealing the agreement. But when their palms met, Ethan felt that same electric current from the night before, the sense that something significant was beginning. "So," Victoria said, still holding his hand, "when should we have our first official date?" "How about next Friday? There's a decent Italian place near my apartment. Nothing fancy, but the food's good." "Sounds perfect. Should I pick you up or—" "Actually, let me pick you up. Text me your address?" Victoria laughed. "You're going to drive all the way into the city to pick me up just to drive back to your neighborhood?" "That's what people do on dates, isn't it?" "I have no idea. Like I said, not great at this." She squeezed his hand once before releasing it. "But I'm willing to learn if you are." The rest of the evening passed in a pleasant blur. Dinner was grilled chicken and vegetables, prepared by James, who turned out to be surprisingly competent with a barbecue. The kids ate quickly and then disappeared upstairs for a movie, their excited voices drifting down through the ceiling. Ethan found himself naturally gravitating toward wherever Victoria was, sitting next to her at dinner, standing near her while cleaning up dishes, ending up beside her on the porch swing as the night grew dark and cool. They talked about inconsequential things, favorite movies, worst jobs they'd ever had, childhood memories. But beneath the surface conversation, Ethan could feel something deeper developing, a connection, tentative, but real. Around 10 o'clock, Maya appeared at the door, rubbing her eyes. "Daddy, I'm tired." "Bedtime then. Say goodnight to everyone." Maya made the rounds, hugging people with the unself-conscious affection of children. When she got to Victoria, she wrapped her small arms around the woman's waist and squeezed tight. "Thank you for the kayaking," she mumbled into Victoria's sweater. Victoria looked momentarily stunned, then her arms came up to return the embrace. "You're welcome, sweetheart. Sleep well." As Ethan carried his drowsy daughter upstairs, he heard James say something that made Victoria laugh. A real laugh, bright and unguarded. The sound made him smile. After tucking Maya in and listening to her sleepy recounting of her favorite parts of the day, Ethan returned downstairs to find the party winding down. People were yawning, making noises about early departures tomorrow, drifting off to their rooms. Victoria was still on the porch, now wrapped in a blanket, staring up at the stars. "Hey," Ethan said softly, not wanting to startle her. She turned, smiling. "Hey yourself. Maya all settled?" "Out like a light. Today wore her out in the best way." He hesitated. "Mind if I sit?" "Please." They shared the porch swing, the blanket large enough to cover both of them. The night was clear and cool, the stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. "I forgot how many stars you can see away from the city," Victoria murmured. "In my apartment, I'm lucky if I can spot 3 constellations through the light pollution." "Where do you live?" "Downtown, 30th floor, great views of other buildings." She laughed softly. "It's ridiculous, really. I have this enormous apartment that I'm barely ever in. I sleep there, shower there, change clothes there. That's about it. Sometimes I wonder why I don't just live at the office." "That sounds lonely." "It is." She pulled the blanket tighter. "I didn't always plan for my life to be like this, you know. When I started my company, I had this vision of building something meaningful while still having a real life. Balance, they call it. But somewhere along the way, the company became everything. And now I'm not sure I remember how to be anything other than a CEO." Ethan considered his next words carefully. "Can I tell you what I see when I look at you? I'm almost afraid to ask. I see someone who's incredibly smart and driven and successful, obviously. But I also see someone who spent her Saturday voluntarily kayaking with a 6-year-old and teaching her about indigenous boat building techniques. Someone who laughs at terrible dad jokes and doesn't mind getting her hands dirty helping with dishes. Someone who's brave enough to say what she wants instead of playing games." He paused. "You're not just a CEO, Victoria. You're a person. And from what I've seen this weekend, you're a pretty great one." In the dim light from the house, he could see her eyes glistening. "That might be the nicest thing anyone's said to me in years." "Then you need better people in your life." "I'm working on that." She shifted closer, her shoulder pressing against his. "Can I tell you something scary?" "Sure." "I'm terrified that I'm going to mess this up, that I'll get too busy or too focused on work, and I'll forget to call or I'll cancel plans at the last minute, and you'll realize I'm not worth the hassle." Ethan turned to face her. "Victoria, I'm a single dad with a demanding kid and a very unglamorous life. If anyone's going to mess this up, it's probably me. But here's what I think. We both go into this knowing it won't be perfect. We'll both make mistakes. The question is whether we're willing to work through them." "Are you?" "Yeah, I am." He surprised himself with how much he meant it. "Are you?" Instead of answering immediately, Victoria leaned in and pressed her lips to his cheek, soft and brief. When she pulled back, she was smiling. "Does that answer your question?" Ethan's heart was hammering. "I think I might need clarification." She laughed. And this time when she leaned in, her lips found his. The kiss was gentle, tentative, both of them clearly out of practice. But it was also warm and sweet and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, Ethan was grinning like an idiot. "Okay," he said. "That was definitely clarification." "Good. Because I'm not always great with words, but I'm pretty clear on how I feel right now." They sat together on the swing for another hour, talking and kissing and planning their first real date. When Victoria finally headed to bed, Ethan remained on the porch, his mind racing too fast for sleep. This was really happening. Against all logic and reason, he was starting a relationship with a woman who should have been completely out of reach. And instead of feeling anxious or inadequate, he felt hopeful. Sunday morning arrived too quickly, bringing with it the bittersweet awareness that the weekend was ending. Checkout was at noon and people began packing up after breakfast. Maya was devastated to leave, extracting promises from the other children to have playdates soon. As Ethan loaded their bags into his truck, Victoria approached, her own sleek black sedan already packed. "So," she said. "Friday?" "Friday. I'll text you this week to confirm the time. I'm looking forward to it." She glanced around to make sure no one was in earshot, then stepped closer. "Thank you, Ethan, for giving this a chance. For giving me a chance. Thank you for being brave enough to say yes to a drunk proposal." She laughed. "Best decision I've made in years." They exchanged phone numbers, both of them hyper-aware of how significant that simple act felt, Then, because Maya was watching from the truck, and because Ethan had never been good at public displays of affection, he simply squeezed Victoria's hand once and climbed into his vehicle. As he pulled out of the driveway, Maya immediately turned to him with wide eyes. "Daddy, are you dating Victoria?" There was no point in lying. "Maybe. Would that be okay with you?" Maya considered this seriously. "She's really nice, and she knows a lot about turtles. So yeah, I think that's okay." High praise. "Are you going to marry her like you joked about?" Ethan nearly drove off the road. "Whoa, kiddo. We're just getting to know each other. Way too early to talk about that." "But you like her, right?" "Yeah," he admitted. "I do." "Good. She makes you smile different." "What does that mean?" "Your regular smile is nice, but when you look at Victoria, you smile like you're happy inside, not just outside." Ethan glanced at his daughter in the rearview mirror, constantly amazed by her perception. "When did you get so smart?" "I've always been smart, Daddy. You just don't always notice." The drive home passed quickly, Maya chattering about the weekend while Ethan's mind wandered to the week ahead. He'd need to figure out what to wear on Friday, where exactly this Italian restaurant was, whether he should bring flowers or if that was too much for a first date. His phone buzzed with a text just as they pulled into their apartment complex. Victoria. Made it home safely. Already missing the lake. And the company. Ethan smiled, that happy inside smile Maya had mentioned, and typed back. Ethan. Same. Drive safe. Talk soon. Victoria. Counting on it. As he helped Maya carry their bags upstairs to their modest two-bedroom apartment, Ethan realized something had fundamentally shifted inside him. For 6 years, he'd been focused solely on survival and stability, on being enough for his daughter, on not making waves or taking risks. His world had become small and safe and predictable. But now, for the first time since Maya was born, he was allowing himself to want something beyond basic security. He was reaching for something uncertain and potentially wonderful, something that scared him as much as it excited him. And the crazy part was, it felt right. That week crawled by with agonizing slowness. Work was the usual chaos of shipping schedules and inventory management, but Ethan found it harder than usual to concentrate. His mind kept drifting to Friday night, running through scenarios and conversations, second-guessing every decision. He and Victoria texted throughout the week. Nothing deep, just small updates about their days. She sent him a photo of her office view at sunset. He sent her a picture of Maya's latest crayon masterpiece. It was casual, easy, building a foundation one message at a time. Wednesday evening, his phone rang instead of chiming with a text. Victoria's name appeared on the screen and his stomach did a small flip. "Hey," he answered. "Hey, is this a bad time? I know it's late." He glanced at the clock, 8:30. "No, it's fine. Maya's doing homework. What's up?" She paused, and he could hear traffic in the background. "I had a really terrible day. Board meeting from hell, 2 deals fell through, my CFO is threatening to quit. And I was driving home thinking about how I'd normally just work through it, stay at the office until midnight running numbers. But instead I found myself wanting to call you. Is that weird?" Ethan's heart squeezed. "It's not weird. I don't want to dump my problems on you. We barely know each other." "Victoria, part of getting to know each other is the not perfect stuff too. Tell me what happened." So she did. For 20 minutes, she talked about boardroom politics and investor pressures and the constant weight of making decisions that affected hundreds of employees. Ethan didn't understand half the business terminology, but he listened, asking questions when appropriate, offering support where he could. When she finally wound down, she let out a long breath. "Sorry, I didn't mean to vent for that long." "Don't apologize. Feeling better?" "Actually, yeah. Significantly. Thank you." "Anytime." He hesitated. "You know what I do when I have a terrible day?" "What?" "I go to this park near my apartment and sit on this specific bench that overlooks a pond. It's not impressive or anything, but it's quiet. And it reminds me that whatever's going wrong, the world keeps turning, ducks keep swimming, kids keep playing, life continues." Victoria was quiet for a moment. "That sounds really nice. Maybe I'll show you sometime." "I'd like that." Her voice softened. "I'm glad I called." "Me too. And Victoria, Friday's still on, right?" Absolutely. Nothing could make me cancel. They said goodnight, and Ethan sat for a long time staring at his phone, a smile playing at his lips. Who was that? Maya asked, appearing in the doorway with her math homework. A friend. Victoria? Yeah. You're smiling again, the happy inside kind. I guess I am. Friday arrived with clear skies and unusually light traffic, which Ethan chose to interpret as a good omen. He'd taken a half day off work, using the afternoon to clean his apartment, even though Victoria wouldn't be seeing it, get a haircut, and change clothes 3 times before settling on dark jeans and a button-down shirt that wasn't too formal, but showed he'd made an effort. Maya was spending the night at her best friend Sarah's house, a regular Friday arrangement that had never felt so perfectly timed. At 5:30, Ethan climbed into his truck and headed toward downtown, his stomach a knot of nervous energy. Victoria's building was easy to spot, a gleaming glass tower that probably cost more per square foot than his entire annual salary. The doorman gave his aging Ford a skeptical look, but directed him to visitor parking. He texted Victoria from the lobby. Ethan, I'm here. Should I come up or... Victoria, coming down, 2 minutes. She appeared exactly 120 seconds later, stepping out of the elevator in a simple navy dress and leather jacket, her hair down around her shoulders. Ethan's breath caught. Hi, she said, suddenly looking as nervous as he felt. Hi, you look beautiful. You clean up pretty well yourself. She glanced around the lobby, then back at him. Ready? Absolutely. The drive back to his neighborhood passed with easy conversation, the initial awkwardness melting away as they fell into the comfortable rhythm they'd developed over text. When Ethan pulled up outside Antonio's, a small family-owned Italian restaurant wedged between a dry cleaner and a bookstore, Victoria looked delighted. This is perfect, she said. I was half afraid you'd try to impress me with some expensive place. On my budget? Not likely. The hostess greeted Ethan by name. He'd been coming here for years, and led them to a quiet corner booth. The restaurant was cozy and warm, red checkered tablecloths and the smell of garlic bread filling the air. So this is your neighborhood, Victoria said, looking around with genuine interest. Tell me about it. And he did. Over plates of pasta and glasses of wine, Ethan told her about the bodega 2 blocks away that knew Maya's name, the library where they spent Saturday mornings, the park with the duck pond where he went to think. He told her about his neighbors, about the rhythm of his days, about the small joys that made up his life. In return, Victoria told him about her world, the relentless pace, the constant pressure, the loneliness of always being the one making final decisions. But she also talked about the thrill of building something from nothing, the satisfaction of solving impossible problems, the pride she felt in her team. They were 2 completely different lives, but somehow, across that table in a neighborhood Italian restaurant, they found common ground. Can I ask you something? Victoria said as they finished dessert. Anything. Why did you agree to this? Really? It would have been so easy to write off what I said at the lake as alcohol-fueled nonsense and move on. Ethan considered the question. Honestly, because you were the first person in 6 years who made me think about the future instead of just surviving the present. And because even though this is terrifying and probably crazy, I haven't felt this alive in longer than I can remember. Victoria reached across the table and took his hand. Good answer. They stayed until the restaurant started closing, reluctant to end the evening. When they finally stepped outside into the cool night air, Ethan realized he didn't want to say goodbye yet. Walk with me, he suggested. There's that park I told you about. It's just a few blocks. Lead the way. The park was quiet at this hour, just a few dog walkers and late-night joggers. Ethan led Victoria to his bench overlooking the pond, where streetlights reflected on the dark water like scattered stars. They sat close together, shoulders touching, watching the ducks settle in for the night. Thank you, Victoria said softly, for tonight, for showing me your world. Thank you for wanting to see it. She turned to face him, and in the dim light, her expression was open and hopeful and a little scared. I know this is just our first date, and I know I said we'd take this slow, but I need you to know something. What's that? When I said yes to your joke proposal, it wasn't completely spontaneous. Something in me recognized something in you, and every conversation we've had since has only confirmed what I felt that night. She took a breath. I'm not looking for casual, Ethan. I'm not good at casual. If we're doing this, I need to know you're all in too. Ethan's heart was racing, but his voice was steady when he answered. Victoria, I have a 6-year-old daughter who's already asking when she gets to see you again. My life doesn't allow for casual, so yeah, I'm all in. Terrified, but all in. Her smile could have lit up the entire park, and when she kissed him this time, it wasn't tentative or uncertain. It was full of promise and possibility, and the brave choice to leap into something unknown together. When they finally pulled apart, breathless and grinning, Victoria rested her forehead against his. So, she whispered, still think I'm crazy? Absolutely, Ethan replied, but I'm starting to think that might be exactly what I need. They sat on that bench for another hour, making plans and sharing dreams and building the foundation of something that had started as a joke but was becoming startlingly, wonderfully real. And somewhere across town, in a sleepover-induced chaos of giggles and popcorn, Maya was telling her best friend about the nice lady her dad was dating who knew everything about turtles and made him smile the happy inside way. The future was uncertain and maybe a little crazy, but for the first time in years, both Ethan and Victoria were ready to find out where it would lead. The weeks that followed their first date unfolded with a rhythm that surprised them both. Despite their vastly different worlds, Ethan and Victoria found ways to weave their lives together in small, deliberate threads. Tuesday evenings became their standing phone call night, after Maya went to bed and before Victoria's late meetings began. Saturdays, when Ethan's schedule allowed, they'd meet for coffee at a cafe halfway between their neighborhoods. Neutral territory where CEO and logistics coordinator became just two people falling for each other over lukewarm lattes and shared pastries. But it was the third Saturday in October when everything shifted. Ethan had been nervous about this particular morning for days. He'd finally worked up the courage to invite Victoria to spend a full day with him and Maya. Not just a quick park visit or an hour of kayaking, but an actual day in their real life. Grocery shopping, Maya's soccer game, the mundane reality of single parenthood in all its chaotic glory. Are you sure about this? Victoria had asked when he'd extended the invitation over the phone. I don't want to intrude on your time with Maya. You're not intruding. Maya's been asking about you constantly. Last week she informed me that you're her second favorite person, right after me and tied with her best friend Sarah. That's a lot of pressure to live up to. You'll be fine. Just be yourself. Although fair warning, 6-year-old soccer can be brutally boring for spectators. Victoria had laughed. I'll manage. Now, standing outside the grocery store at 9 in the morning, Ethan watched Victoria's car pull into the parking lot and felt his stomach flutter with nerves he hadn't experienced since high school. Maya was practically vibrating with excitement beside him, wearing her soccer uniform under her jacket. There she is, Maya shrieked, waving enthusiastically as Victoria climbed out of her sedan. She'd dressed down for the occasion, jeans, sneakers, a simple green sweater, but she still looked impossibly put together compared to Ethan in his worn flannel and Maya in her grass-stained cleats. Good morning, Victoria said, her smile warm and genuine. She crouched down to Maya's level. Love the uniform. What position do you play? Forward. I scored 2 goals last week. Daddy says I'm really good. Daddy's right. Victoria straightened, meeting Ethan's eyes over Maya's head. Morning. Morning, ready for the glamorous world of weekend errands? Lead the way. The grocery store was crowded with weekend shoppers, and Ethan found himself apologizing repeatedly as he maneuvered the cart through cramped aisles, while Maya darted ahead examining everything with the intense focus only children possess. Maya, we don't need 5 boxes of cookies, Ethan called out as his daughter loaded the cart. But what if Victoria likes different kinds? We should have options. Victoria caught up to them, gently taking 2 boxes back. I like chocolate chip best. 1 box is perfect. Maya considered this, then nodded seriously and returned the other boxes to the shelf. They fell into an easy rhythm, Victoria somehow anticipating what Ethan needed before he asked, holding items while he checked his list, entertaining Maya when she got restless, suggesting meal ideas that made his budget-conscious planning feel less like deprivation and more like creativity. You're good at this, Ethan observed as they waited in the checkout line. At grocery shopping? At fitting in. With us, it's He struggled for the right words. It's nice. Really nice. Victoria's expression softened. I like being part of an us. The checkout clerk, an older woman named Dottie who'd been ringing up Ethan's groceries for 3 years, gave Victoria an appraising look. New girlfriend. Ethan felt heat creep up his neck, but before he could stammer out a response, Victoria smiled and said simply, Yes. Dottie beamed. Good for you, honey. This one's a keeper. Always so patient with his little girl. As they loaded bags into Ethan's truck, Maya chattering about her upcoming game, Victoria leaned close and whispered, Was that okay? What I told the clerk? More than okay, Ethan replied, his heart doing something complicated in his chest. It was perfect. The soccer field was a muddy mess from recent rain, and the bleachers were filled with parents bundled in jackets and clutching coffee thermoses. Ethan found their usual spot, third row, right side, perfect view of the goal Maya would be attacking, and Victoria settled in beside him while Maya ran off to join her team. Fair warning, Ethan said. These games can get intense. Parents take it very seriously. It's 6-year-olds kicking a ball around a field. You'd think that would matter. It doesn't. He was proven right within the first 10 minutes when the father next to them started screaming instructions at his daughter with the intensity of a professional coach. Victoria's eyebrows climbed higher with each bellowed command. Does he know they can barely hear him? She whispered. Logic has no place in youth sports. Maya's team was holding their own, though holding their own mostly meant chasing the ball in a chaotic cluster that occasionally moved in the right direction. When Maya broke free from the pack and actually had a clear shot on goal, Ethan was on his feet before he realized it, shouting encouragement. She missed by about 3 feet, sending the ball rolling sadly past the post. Good try, Maya, Victoria called out, her voice carrying across the field. Great positioning. Maya's face lit up at the recognition, and even from this distance, Ethan could see her puff up with pride. You don't have to do that, he said quietly as they sat back down. Do what? Pretend to understand soccer positioning just to make her feel good. Victoria turned to look at him, something fierce in her expression. I'm not pretending. I played soccer in college. Division II, full scholarship. And Maya's positioning was actually excellent. She just needs to work on following through with her kick. Ethan stared at her. You played college soccer? 4 years. Captain my senior year. She grinned at his shocked expression. What, you thought I spent my entire youth in boardrooms? I don't know what I thought. You just keep surprising me. Good. I'd hate to be predictable. They watched the rest of the game in companionable silence, occasionally calling out encouragement, Victoria offering actual technical advice that made Ethan realize how little he actually knew about the sport his daughter played twice a week. When Maya scored in the final minutes, a scrappy goal off a deflection that barely crossed the line, they both leaped up cheering, and Victoria's hand found Ethan's without either of them thinking about it. After the game, Maya came running over, sweaty and exhilarated. Did you see? Did you see my goal? We saw everything, Victoria said. That was an amazing shot. It wasn't really a shot. It kind of just bounced off my foot. The best goals are the ones that find a way in no matter what. Trust me, I scored plenty of ugly goals in my day. Maya's eyes went wide. You played soccer? For years. Want me to show you a trick sometime? Yes. Daddy, can Victoria come to my practice next week? Ethan met Victoria's eyes over Maya's head, asking a silent question. Victoria nodded slightly. If Victoria has time in her schedule, I'm sure she'd be happy to. I'll make time, Victoria said firmly. As they walked back to the parking lot, Maya between them holding both their hands and swinging wildly, Ethan felt something settle deep in his chest. This wasn't just dating anymore. This was building something real, something that included all the messy, ordinary parts of life that couldn't be scheduled or controlled. So, Victoria said as they reached her car, what's next on the agenda? Lunch, probably. Then Maya has some homework and I need to meal prep for the week. He hesitated. You're welcome to join us, but I understand if you need to get back. I'm sure you have work. I'd love to join you, Victoria interrupted, if that's okay. Really? Really. Although I should warn you, I'm terrible at meal prep. My idea of preparing for the week is ordering the same salad from the same restaurant 5 days in advance. Maya giggled. That's silly. It is silly, which is why I'd love to learn how normal people do it. They went to a pizza place near Ethan's apartment. Nothing fancy, but with good food and crayons for Maya to draw with while they waited. Victoria seemed perfectly content in the worn vinyl booth, laughing at Maya's knock-knock jokes and stealing bites of Ethan's pepperoni slice. Back at the apartment, while Maya sprawled on the living room floor with her math homework, Ethan and Victoria tackled meal prep in the tiny kitchen. The space was barely big enough for one person, let alone two, which meant they were constantly brushing against each other. Victoria's hand on his back as she reached for a cutting board, Ethan's arm around her waist as he grabbed a pot from the overhead cabinet. This kitchen is about a quarter the size of mine, Victoria observed, efficiently chopping vegetables with surprising skill. Yeah, well, my kitchen gets more use than yours probably does. Fair point. I think the most elaborate thing I've made this year is toast. That's criminal. Cooking can be relaxing, says the man doing it out of necessity. Necessity doesn't mean it can't also be enjoyable. He glanced at her. You're actually pretty good with that knife. I took a cooking class once. Thought it would help me network with potential investors. Turns out I just really like chopping things. They fell into an easy rhythm, Victoria following his lead as they prepared chicken and rice bowls, vegetable stir-fry, and a pasta dish that could be easily reheated. The kitchen filled with good smells, and from the living room they could hear Maya talking to herself as she worked through her multiplication tables. This is nice, Victoria said quietly as she sealed a container. Domestic. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Good. Definitely good. She set down the container and turned to face him fully. Ethan, I need to tell you something. His stomach tightened at her serious tone. Okay. I've been thinking about this for weeks, trying to find the right time, but I'm starting to realize there isn't a right time, so I'm just going to say it. You're scaring me a little. Don't be scared. She took a breath. My board has been pushing me to relocate the company to San Francisco. Better tech ecosystem, more venture capital, all the usual arguments. I've been fighting it because my whole life is here, but the truth is, my whole life is just work. Was just work. She reached for his hand. But now I have a reason to stay. Actually, I have two reasons. You and Maya. Ethan felt like all the air had left the room. Victoria, I'm not telling you this to pressure you or to make you feel responsible for my business decisions. I'm telling you because you deserve to know that this, us, is important enough to me that I'm willing to fight for it, to rearrange my priorities, to choose something that matters over something that just makes sense on paper. Before Ethan could respond, Maya appeared in the doorway. I finished my homework. Can we watch a movie? Victoria stepped back, releasing his hand, her expression shifting back to easy warmth. What movie were you thinking? The one with the princess who has ice powers. I love that one. Can I watch with you? Maya's face lit up. Yes, Daddy, can Victoria sit between us? They settled on the worn couch, Maya on one side of Victoria, Ethan on the other, and started the movie. Within 20 minutes, Maya was leaning heavily against Victoria's shoulder, her eyelids drooping despite her insistence that she wasn't tired. Victoria adjusted to support her weight, one arm around the child's shoulders, and met Ethan's eyes over Maya's head. The tenderness in her expression made his chest ache. By the time the movie reached its climax, Maya was fully asleep, her breathing deep and even. Victoria hadn't moved, clearly reluctant to disturb her. I should put her to bed, Ethan whispered. In a minute. She's comfortable. They sat in the flickering light of the television, the weight of their earlier conversation hanging between them. When the credits finally rolled, Ethan carefully lifted Maya into his arms. She stirred but didn't wake as he carried her to her bedroom. When he returned to the living room, Victoria was standing by the window, looking out at the parking lot below. Hey, he said softly. She turned. Hey, I should probably go. It's getting late. Victoria, wait. What you said earlier in the kitchen, you don't have to respond right now. I know it was a lot. It was a lot, but it was also... He crossed the room to stand in front of her. No one has ever chosen me before. Not like that. Maya's mother chose to leave. My parents chose their own lives over being involved with mine. People I've dated chose other things. better jobs, different cities, easier relationships. But you're choosing this, choosing us. Even when it's complicated and inconvenient and probably not the smartest business decision. It's the best decision I've made in years, Victoria said firmly. Maybe ever. I'm choosing this too, choosing you. All in, remember? She smiled, and it was like sunrise breaking through clouds. All in. When they kissed this time, it felt different than before. Not tentative or exploratory, but certain. A promise being made without words, a future being built in the space between heartbeats. They stood by the window for a long time, holding each other, watching the world outside continue its evening rhythm, while inside this small apartment, something extraordinary was taking root. The next few weeks blurred together in the best possible way. Victoria became a fixture in their lives, attending Maya's soccer practices, and actually coaching her through drills that dramatically improved her game. She started keeping spare clothes at Ethan's apartment and a toothbrush in his bathroom. Sunday mornings became their time. Victoria would arrive early with bagels and the newspaper, and they'd spend lazy hours reading and talking while Maya watched cartoons. But it wasn't all easy integration. There were moments when their different worlds collided uncomfortably. Like the time Victoria's phone rang during dinner and she had to take an emergency call that lasted 45 minutes, leaving Ethan and Maya to eat cold pasta while she paced the living room talking about stock options and merger terms in a voice that was all CEO and no warmth. Or when Ethan couldn't afford tickets to a concert Victoria wanted to attend and felt the sharp sting of their financial disparity. The first real fight came in mid-November. Victoria had invited them to a company event, a formal gala celebrating some major milestone Ethan didn't fully understand. He'd tried to decline gracefully, knowing he didn't own anything appropriate to wear and would be hopelessly out of place among her colleagues and investors. "Just come," Victoria had pressed. "I want you there. Both of you." "Victoria, Maya's 6. She can't sit through a 4-hour business dinner. So get a sitter. Please, Ethan, this is important to me." "Why? So you can show off your normal boyfriend to all your rich friends?" The words had come out harsher than he'd intended, sharp with insecurity and frustration. Victoria had recoiled like he'd struck her. "Is that really what you think?" Her voice had gone cold in a way he'd never heard before. "That you're some kind of trophy? Some proof that I can slum it with regular people?" "That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean? Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like you're the one with the problem. Like you can't handle the fact that I have a successful career and money and connections. That's not fair. Isn't it? Every time I try to include you in my world, you find a reason to say no. Every time I offer to help with something, anything, you act like it's charity. I'm not trying to change you, Ethan. I'm trying to share my life with you. But you won't let me." They'd been standing in his kitchen, voices raised enough that he worried about Maya hearing from her bedroom. The silence that followed Victoria's accusation was deafening. "You're right," Ethan had finally said, his anger deflating into something closer to shame. "I'm sorry. I've been so focused on not being intimidated by your success that I've been making you feel like you have to hide parts of your life from me. That's not fair to you." Victoria's expression had softened. "And I'm sorry for pushing. I forget that my normal isn't everyone's normal. I shouldn't have dismissed your concerns about the gala. I'll go, and I'll stop being weird about the money thing. Or I'll try, at least. I don't need you to be perfect. I just need you to be honest with me." They'd held each other in that cramped kitchen, both realizing that building a life together meant more than just enjoying each other's company. It meant navigating differences, challenging assumptions, being willing to be uncomfortable in service of something bigger. The gala itself turned out to be less intimidating than Ethan had feared. Victoria had insisted on buying him a suit. "It's a work expense," she'd said when he'd protested, and he'd managed to find a reliable sitter for Maya through one of the soccer moms. The event was held in a ballroom that probably cost more to rent for one night than Ethan made in a month, filled with people in designer clothes making conversation that often went over his head. But Victoria never left his side. She introduced him to everyone not as my boyfriend, but as Ethan Cole, letting him define himself rather than being defined by his relationship to her. When business talk got too technical, she'd translate quietly. When he felt overwhelmed by the opulence, she'd squeeze his hand and whisper something that made him laugh. "You're doing great," she'd murmured during a lull in conversation. I feel like an imposter. Everyone here feels like an imposter. We're all just pretending we belong until we convince ourselves it's true. Even you? Especially me. Why do you think I work so hard? I'm terrified that if I stop for even a second, someone will realize I have no idea what I'm doing. The vulnerability in her admission had struck him. Here was Victoria Hale, CEO and powerhouse, admitting to the same doubts and fears that plagued him. It made her seem more real, more reachable. Later that night, after they'd returned to his apartment and paid the sitter, Victoria had collapsed on his couch with her heels kicked off and her carefully styled hair coming loose. "Thank you for tonight," she'd said, "for being there, for trying. Thank you for being patient with me, for not giving up when I'm being an idiot about things. We're both learning. That's what relationships are, right? Constant learning and adjustment and choosing each other over and over." Ethan had sat beside her, pulling her feet into his lap and absently massaging them. "When did you get so wise about relationships? I thought you said you were terrible at this." "I am terrible at this, but I'm good at problem solving, and I'm very motivated to solve this particular problem." "We're not a problem to be solved, Victoria. We're just two people figuring it out as we go." She'd smiled, soft and genuine. "I like the sound of that. Just two people figuring it out." As November turned to December, they fell deeper into each other's lives. Victoria started attending Maya's school events, sitting through holiday concerts and art shows with the patience of someone who genuinely enjoyed being there. Ethan started reading business news so he could better understand Victoria's world, asking intelligent questions about her deals and challenges. They fought occasionally, usually about money or time management, but they always talked through it, always chose communication over sulking. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the question that had started as a joke began to feel less like a fantasy and more like an inevitability. It was Maya, perceptive as always, who brought it up first. They were decorating the apartment for Christmas. A modest tree from the grocery store lot, lights that had been carefully stored and reused for 3 years running, ornaments that were more sentimental than beautiful. Victoria had joined them after work, still in her business attire, game to help despite having no experience with holiday decorating. "Are you going to live with us?" Maya had asked suddenly, looking up from the box of ornaments she was sorting through. Victoria had frozen, a string of lights in her hands. "What makes you ask that, sweetheart?" "You're here all the time, and you have a toothbrush in our bathroom, and clothes in Daddy's closet. Sarah says that means you're going to live here." Ethan had caught Victoria's eye, asking a silent question. They hadn't discussed this yet, hadn't even approached the topic of moving in together. "Would you want me to live here?" Victoria had asked carefully. Maya had considered this with the seriousness she brought to all important questions. "I think so. You make good pancakes, and you help me with my math homework better than Daddy does." "Hey," Ethan had protested, "my math help is perfectly adequate." "Your math help is confusing," Maya had replied with devastating honesty. "Victoria explains it better." Victoria had laughed, but her eyes were bright with something that looked like tears. "Well, I'm glad I'm useful for something, but I can't just move in without talking to your dad about it first." "Why not? Adults make things so complicated." "Yes, we do. But sometimes complicated is necessary." After Maya had gone to bed, Ethan and Victoria had sat on the couch with mugs of tea, the Christmas tree lights twinkling in the corner. "So," Ethan had said, "that was a loaded question." "It was. I'm sorry if it made you uncomfortable." "It didn't. Or it did, but in a good way. Like it forced us to think about something we've been dancing around." Victoria had set down her mug. "Do you want me to move in?" "Do you want to move in?" I asked first. Ethan had taken her hand. "My apartment is tiny. You're used to space and luxury and probably a bathroom that isn't shared with a 6-year-old who leaves wet towels on the floor. It would be a massive downgrade for you." "You didn't answer my question." "Yes," he'd admitted. "I want you to move in. I want to wake up next to you every morning and come home to you every night and build a life that's actually ours instead of just scheduled visits. But I don't want you to feel like you have to give up your life for mine." Victoria had been quiet for a long moment, her thumb tracing circles on his palm. "What if we found somewhere new? Not your place or my place, but our place. Somewhere big enough for all three of us, with a yard for Maya and an office for me, and enough space that we're not constantly tripping over each other. Victoria, I can't afford. We afford it together, as partners, equal partners. It's not equal if you're paying 3 times what I am. Then we figure out a split that feels fair. You pay what you can, I pay the rest. Or we keep our finances separate and just split bills proportionally. There are a million ways to make this work, Ethan. The question is whether you want to try. He'd looked at her. This brilliant, successful, complicated woman who'd chosen him and his daughter against all logic and felt certainty settle in his bones. I want to try, he'd said. I want all of it. Living together, building a home, figuring out how to merge our lives. I want to fall asleep next to you and wake up with you and deal with all the messy, complicated parts of sharing space and routines and decisions. Victoria's smile had been radiant. Really? Really? On one condition. What's that? We tell Maya together, and we make it clear that this is about building a family, not just about you moving in with us. A family, Victoria had repeated softly, testing the word. I like the sound of that. They'd told Maya the next morning over pancakes, Victoria's recipe, which was admittedly better than Ethan's. Maya had listened carefully, asked practical questions about whether she'd have to change schools and whether they could bring the Christmas tree to the new place, then delivered her verdict with characteristic directness. Okay, but can I have a bigger room? And can we get a dog? We'll see about the room, Ethan had said. Definitely no on the dog. Yet, Victoria had added with a grin. No dog yet. The house hunting began in earnest after the holidays, and it was both exciting and exhausting. They looked at places in Ethan's neighborhood that Victoria loved, but that lacked office space. Places near Victoria's work that Ethan loved, but that would make Maya's commute to school impossible. Places that split the difference, but felt characterless and cold. And then they found it. A 3-bedroom craftsman in a neighborhood neither of them had considered, 20 minutes from Ethan's work and 30 from Victoria's office, with a fenced backyard and a finished basement that could be converted to office space. It needed work. The kitchen was dated, the bathrooms needed updating, the hardwood floors were scratched. But it had good bones and a warmth that made all 3 of them feel immediately at home. It's perfect, Maya had declared after racing through every room twice. It needs a lot of renovation, Ethan had pointed out. So we renovate, Victoria had said. We make it exactly what we want it to be. Together. Standing in that empty living room, sunlight streaming through windows that looked out on a yard where Maya was already planting a garden, Ethan had felt the last pieces of his resistance crumble. This wasn't about him accepting charity or Victoria slumming in his world. This was about building something new, something that belonged to both of them equally. Let's do it, he'd said. Let's make an offer. Victoria had kissed him right there in the empty house, while Maya shrieked with delight in the backyard. And Ethan had known with absolute certainty that this was right. Not perfect, not without challenges, but right in all the ways that mattered. They were building a family, a real, messy, complicated, beautiful family. And it had all started with a joke proposal by a lake that neither of them had been able to forget. The renovation became their first real test as a family unit. What had looked like manageable updates during the house inspection turned into a cascade of discoveries that would have been comical if they weren't so expensive. The outdated kitchen revealed plumbing that hadn't been touched since 1987. The scratched hardwood floors concealed water damage in the corner of the dining room. The charming bay window in what would be Maya's room had a crack in the frame that let in drafts and probably several generations of insects. We can still back out, Ethan had said, standing in the gutted kitchen 3 weeks after closing. Around them, contractors moved with purposeful chaos, tearing out cabinets and exposing walls that revealed even more problems. The inspection contingency is over, but we could sell and cut our losses. Victoria had been reviewing a quote from the plumber, her expression unreadable. When she finally looked up, there was determination in her eyes rather than doubt. Are you kidding? This is the fun part. We get to build exactly what we want. She gestured at the empty space where cabinets had been. I'm thinking dark blue lower cabinets here, maybe white uppers to keep it bright. And we should knock out this wall between the kitchen and dining room, create an open concept so Maya can do homework at the table while we cook. That wall might be load-bearing. Then we'll put in a beam. Ethan, this is our house, our home. A little unexpected plumbing doesn't change that. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and despite his anxiety about the mounting costs, Ethan found himself getting pulled into the planning. They spent evenings huddled over paint samples and tile options, debating the merits of subway tile versus hexagon, arguing over whether the living room should be gray or grage. Maya contributed her opinions with the confidence of a seasoned designer, insisting that her room should be purple and that they absolutely needed a reading nook with built-in shelves. The move-in date got pushed back twice, then a third time when the contractor discovered the electrical panel needed to be completely replaced. They were still living in Ethan's cramped apartment, now with Victoria's belongings crammed into every available space, creating an obstacle course of boxes and furniture that made the already tight quarters nearly impossible to navigate. "I'm sorry," Victoria said one evening after tripping over a stack of her work files for the third time. "I know this is miserable." Ethan looked up from where he was helping Maya with her homework at the kitchen table, their knees knocking together in the confined space. "It's temporary. And honestly, having you here, even in this chaos, is better than you being across town. You're just saying that because I've been doing most of the cooking." "That's definitely part of it," he admitted with a grin, "but not all of it." Maya looked up from her math worksheet. "When we move to the new house, will things be less squishy?" "So much less squishy," Victoria promised. "You'll have your own room with that purple paint you picked out and the reading nook, and Daddy and I will have space to work without sitting on top of each other." "I like it when we're all close together," Maya said thoughtfully. "But maybe a little less close would be good too." The delays also meant they were still living separately when Victoria's parents announced they'd be visiting. The phone call came on a Tuesday evening in late February, Victoria's mother's voice crisp and businesslike even through the speaker. "Darling, your father and I will be in town next weekend for a conference. We thought we'd stop by, see this house you've been going on about." Victoria had gone very still, her knuckles white around her phone. "Actually, Mom, the house isn't quite ready yet. We're still in renovation. We're not expecting a tour, dear. We'd just like to meet this man you've been seeing. You have been rather secretive about him." After the call ended, Victoria had sat in silence for a long moment before Ethan gently took the phone from her hand. "That bad?" he asked. "My parents are complicated. They built their wealth from nothing, which means they're very particular about people's motivations, especially people who date their only daughter. They think I'm after your money. They think everyone is after my money. Or my connections. Or both." She looked at him with worry creasing her forehead. "They're going to grill you. Ask invasive questions. Probably try to determine your net worth within the first 10 minutes. Victoria, I don't care what they think. I care. I care because I love you, and I want them to see what I see. But I also know how they are, and I don't want you to feel ambushed." The words hung in the air between them. Love. She'd said it casually, embedded in the middle of a sentence about her parents, but it was the first time either of them had spoken it aloud. "You love me?" Ethan asked quietly. Victoria's eyes widened as she realized what she'd said. Yes, I do. I love you. Is that okay?" Instead of answering, Ethan pulled her close and kissed her thoroughly, trying to communicate everything he felt through the press of his lips against hers. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "I love you too. Have for a while now, actually. Just didn't know when to say it. How about we say it more often?" "Deal." The dinner with Victoria's parents was scheduled for Saturday evening at an upscale steakhouse downtown, the kind of place where Ethan knew instinctively he'd be underdressed, no matter what he wore. Victoria had offered to buy him a new suit, but he'd declined, determined to show up as himself rather than some polished version designed to impress. They'd arranged for Maya to spend the night with Sarah, sparing her the tension of a formal adult dinner. As Ethan adjusted his tie for the fourth time in Victoria's apartment bathroom, he could hear her on the phone in the living room, her voice tight with stress. "Yes, Mom, we'll be there at 7. "No, he's not in finance or tech. I told you he works in logistics. Mom, can you please just—" "Yes, I know. We'll see you soon." When she appeared in the bathroom doorway, Ethan could see the strain around her eyes. "Ready?" she asked. "As I'll ever be. You?" "Not even slightly." She stepped into his arms, careful not to wrinkle his shirt. "Thank you for doing this. I know it's going to be uncomfortable." "Hey, if I can survive a corporate gala, I can survive dinner with your parents." "You severely underestimate my parents." She was not wrong. Victoria's father, Richard Hale, was a tall man with silver hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room. Her mother, Patricia, was elegant in the way that came from decades of careful maintenance and the best cosmetic treatments money could buy. They were already seated when Ethan and Victoria arrived, and Richard's handshake was crushing enough to be a statement. "Ethan Cole," Richard said, his tone making the name sound like a question. "Victoria tells us you work in logistics." "Yes, sir. I'm a coordinator at Harmon Freight." "Fascinating. And how did you two meet?" Before Ethan could answer, Victoria jumped in. "At a work event. Well, a friend's event. It's a long story." Patricia's smile was polite but cool. "I'm sure we have time for a long story." The dinner proceeded exactly as Victoria had warned. Between courses of overpriced steak and vegetables that were more garnish than substance, her parents peppered Ethan with questions that were ostensibly friendly, but felt more like an interrogation. What were his career ambitions? Did he have a degree? What did his parents do? Had he been married before? "I have a daughter," Ethan said, deciding that honesty was his only viable strategy. "Maya. She's 6. Her mother and I were never married, and she's not involved in our lives. It's been just me and Maya for most of her life." The temperature at the table seemed to drop several degrees. "A single father," Patricia said, investing the words with complex meaning. "That must be very challenging." "It has its moments, but Maya's the best thing that's ever happened to me." "And now you're dating a woman of considerable means," Richard observed. "I'm sure that helps with some of those challenges." Victoria's hand tightened on her water glass. "Dad, it's okay," Ethan said quietly. He met Richard's gaze directly. "I'm sure from your perspective this looks suspicious. I get it, but I'm going to be very clear about something. I didn't know who Victoria was when I met her. Didn't know about her company, her money, any of it. I just knew she was someone who made me want to be braver than I've been in years. And yes, our financial situations are different, very different, but that's something we navigate together, as partners." "Partners," Richard repeated. "In what sense?" "In every sense. We're moving in together, bought a house. We're building a life." Patricia's expression was carefully neutral, but Ethan could see the calculation happening behind her eyes. "Victoria mentioned you have a daughter. Does she live with you full-time?" "Yes. Like I said, her mother isn't in the picture." "And what does Maya think of all these changes? New house? New family structure?" It was Victoria who answered, her voice firm. "Maya is thrilled. She adores the house, loves the neighborhood, and she and I have a great relationship. She's actually the one who asked when I was going to move in with them." "How progressive," Patricia said. The rest of dinner was a careful dance of polite conversation and unspoken judgments. By the time dessert arrived, Ethan felt like he'd been through a particularly aggressive job interview. Victoria was wound so tight he could practically feel the tension radiating off her. In the parking lot after dinner, as her parents departed with promises to stay in touch, Victoria finally let out the breath she'd been holding. "I'm so sorry," she said. "That was worse than I expected." "They hate me." "They don't hate you. They're just protective and snobby and completely unable to see past their own biases." She leaned against his truck, looking exhausted. "But I don't care what they think. I love you, and we're building our life together regardless of their approval." "Do you need their approval?" Victoria considered the question. "Part of me wants it, yeah. They're my parents. But I stopped living my life according to their expectations a long time ago. If they can't see how wonderful you are, that's their loss." Ethan pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "For what it's worth, I think they'll come around eventually. Once they see we're serious and I'm not going anywhere." "You're more optimistic than I am." "One of us has to be." The house was finally ready in mid-March, 3 months after their original move-in date and significantly over budget. But when they walked through the completed renovation with Maya bouncing excitedly ahead of them, every delay and expense felt worth it. The kitchen was exactly as Victoria had envisioned, with dark blue cabinets and white countertops, the wall to the dining room removed to create an open flow. Maya's room was a perfect purple sanctuary with built-in bookshelves flanking a window seat. The master bedroom was spacious and calm, with enough closet space that they weren't fighting for hangers. Victoria's basement office had been outfitted with everything she needed to work from home, which she'd been doing more and more often. "What do you think?" Victoria asked as they stood in the living room, the last of the moving boxes finally unpacked. "I think it's perfect," Ethan said honestly. "I think it's home." That night, after Maya had been tucked into bed in her new purple room, after they'd christened their new bedroom with champagne and laughter and hands that knew each other well by now, Ethan lay awake listening to Victoria breathe beside him. They'd come so far from that joke proposal by the lake, from strangers to partners, from separate lives to this beautiful merger of chaos and love and daily compromise. And yet, that original question kept circling back through his mind. She'd said yes once as a leap of faith, but that had been to a joke, a possibility, a maybe someday fantasy. What would she say if he asked her now, for real, with full knowledge of what their life together actually looked like? The thought terrified and excited him in equal measure. Over the following weeks, Ethan found himself thinking about it constantly. In quiet moments while Victoria worked in her basement office and Maya did homework at the kitchen table. During family dinners where they'd all pitch in to cook, Maya's help usually creating more chaos than efficiency. On lazy Sunday mornings when they'd all pile into the master bed to read, Maya between them with her chapter book while Ethan and Victoria pretended to focus on their respective books, but mostly just watched their daughter with identical expressions of contentment. This was his life now. Their life. And he wanted to make it official, to stand up in front of everyone they knew and claim this woman as his wife, this child as their daughter, this messy, beautiful life as their permanent reality. But how did you propose to someone who'd already said yes to a joke proposal? How did you make it special and meaningful when the whole foundation of your relationship was built on that moment of spontaneous absurdity? He was still turning the question over in his mind when Victoria's assistant called on a Tuesday afternoon in early April. Ethan was at work, reviewing shipping manifests, when his phone buzzed with an unknown number. "Is this Ethan Cole?" a professional female voice asked. "Yes." "This is Jennifer Park, Ms. Hale's executive assistant. I'm calling because Victoria had to leave her phone at the office this morning, and she asked me to reach out to you about tonight. She has a board meeting that's running late, so she won't be home for dinner. She said to tell you she's sorry, and she'll make it up to you this weekend." "Oh, okay. Thanks for letting me know." "She also wanted me to remind you about the lake house reservation for this weekend. She said you'd know what that meant." Ethan's mind went blank. "Lake house?" There was a pause. "Yes, the rental at Lake Meridian, the same place where you two met. She made a reservation for this Friday through Sunday. She seemed to think it was a surprise, but given that I'm calling you, perhaps I've ruined it." No, it's fine. Thank you for letting me know." After hanging up, Ethan sat staring at his computer screen without seeing it. Victoria had booked the lake house where they'd met, the place where a drunk joke had turned into something real. She was planning something clearly, but what? The realization hit him like a physical force. She was going to propose. Victoria was going to beat him to it, was going to ask him the question he'd been working up the courage to ask her, and suddenly Ethan knew exactly what he had to do. He left work early, something he never did, and drove straight to the jewelry district downtown. He'd been looking at rings online for weeks, bookmarking options and agonizing over prices, but he'd never committed. Now, with 3 days until the lake trip, he needed to move fast. The jeweler was a small family-owned shop that had been recommended by James. The owner, an elderly man named Solomon, listened patiently as Ethan explained his situation, the timeline, the budget constraints, the need for something perfect that wouldn't bankrupt him. "You're in luck," Solomon said, leading him to a case. "I have something that just came in yesterday, estate sale. The woman who owned it was married for 63 years, and her children wanted it to go to someone who would appreciate its history." The ring was simple but beautiful, a vintage setting with a single diamond, nothing ostentatious but clearly well-crafted. The band had a delicate engraving of flowers that reminded Ethan of Victoria's subtle elegance. "It's perfect," he said, "but I'm sure it's out of my price range." Solomon named a figure that was high but not impossible, especially if Ethan dipped into the savings he'd been carefully building. When he hesitated, the jeweler smiled kindly.
I can tell from the way you talk about her that this is the right decision, and I'll tell you what the woman's daughter told me when she brought this in. Make sure it goes to someone who understands that marriage is about showing up every day, not just the big romantic gestures. Does that sound like you? Yeah, Ethan said, his throat tight. Yeah, it does. He bought the ring. The next 3 days passed in a blur of planning and anxiety.
Ethan arranged for Maya to spend the weekend with Sarah's family, carefully packed bags for himself and Victoria, and tried to act normal despite the fact that his heart rate seemed permanently elevated. Victoria was clearly excited about the lake trip, but trying to play it cool, which only confirmed Ethan's suspicion that she was planning something. They loaded the truck Friday afternoon, Victoria chattering about how nice it would be to relax and revisit the place where everything started. No pressure or anything, she said with a grin. Just a nice, chill weekend. Right, chill, got it. The drive to Lake Meridian felt both infinitely long and far too short. Ethan's hand kept drifting to his jacket pocket where the ring box sat, a small weight that felt like it contained entire futures. The rental house was the same one from that first weekend, and stepping inside felt like traveling through time. The same cedar walls, the same view of the lake, the same fire pit visible through the back windows. But instead of being filled with coworkers and strangers, it was just the two of them. I can't believe it's been almost a year, Victoria said, setting her bag down in the master bedroom. Feels like yesterday and a lifetime ago at the same time. A lot has changed. Everything has changed. She turned to face him, and there was something nervous in her expression. Ethan, there's something I want to talk to you about this weekend. His heart hammered. Yeah? Yeah, but maybe we should settle in first, take a walk, have some dinner, just be here together for a bit. Sounds good. They walked down to the dock as the sun started its descent, the lake golden and peaceful just as it had been that first night. The fire pit had been pre-stocked with wood, clearly part of the rental package, and they stood near it watching the light change. Do you remember what you said to me right here? Victoria asked. Which part? I said a lot of things. The joke. The proposal. Ethan's pulse quickened. How could I forget? It changed everything. It did. She turned to face him fully. I've been thinking about that a lot lately, about how something that started as a joke became the most real thing in my life, about how sometimes the best things happen when you're brave enough to say yes to the impossible. This was it. She was building up to proposing, and Ethan knew he had to act now or lose his chance. Victoria, wait, he said, reaching into his pocket. Before you say whatever you're planning to say, I need to say something first. Her eyes widened as he pulled out the ring box. Ethan, no, please, let me do this. He took a breath, trying to steady his nerves. A year ago, I made a joke. I asked you to marry me because people were chanting and I was drunk and it seemed funny. And you said yes, which was even crazier than the question. But that yes changed my entire life. Victoria's eyes were already glistening with tears. You took a chance on me when you had absolutely no reason to. You chose me and Maya over everything easier and more logical. You built a home with us, fought for us, loved us when we were messy and complicated and probably more trouble than we were worth. And somewhere in all of that, I fell completely, impossibly in love with you. He opened the ring box, revealing the vintage diamond. So I'm asking you again, Victoria Hale, but this time it's not a joke. This time I'm asking because I can't imagine my life without you in it. This time I'm asking because I want to spend every day for the rest of my life choosing you, building with you, loving you. Tears were streaming down Victoria's face now. Ethan, will you marry me? For real this time. She laughed through her tears, a sound that was half sob, half joy. You absolute fool! I was going to propose to you. I know, your assistant accidentally told me, so I had to beat you to it. That's cheating. Is that a yes or not? Instead of answering, Victoria threw her arms around his neck and kissed him fiercely. When they finally broke apart, both laughing and crying, she held out her left hand. Yes, you beautiful idiot. Yes, I'll marry you. I've been ready to marry you since that first night when I said yes to a joke and meant it more than I've ever meant anything. Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands. It fit perfectly, the vintage diamond catching the dying sunlight. I had a whole speech planned, Victoria said, staring at the ring, and flowers. And I was going to have champagne and music and make it perfect. This is perfect. We're standing in the exact spot where everything started, and we're choosing each other again. What could be more perfect than that? She kissed him again, softer this time, and Ethan felt like his heart might burst from happiness. They built a fire in the pit as darkness fell, sitting close together on one of the log benches, Victoria's left hand in Ethan's so he could keep looking at the ring on her finger. "We should call Maya," Victoria said. "Tell her the news. She's going to lose her mind. She's been asking when we're getting married since we moved into the house. Smart kid. She saw where this was headed before we did." Ethan pulled out his phone and dialed Sarah's mom, who answered on the second ring. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Everything's great. Could I talk to Maya for a second?" A moment later, his daughter's voice came through, slightly breathless. "Daddy, are you okay?" "I'm fine, sweetheart. I just wanted to tell you something important. Victoria and I are getting married." The shriek that came through the phone was so loud, both Ethan and Victoria could hear it clearly. "Really? Like for real married? With a wedding and a dress and everything?" "For real married. What do you think about that?" "I think it's the best thing ever. Can I be in the wedding? Can I wear a fancy dress? When is it going to be?" Victoria leaned closer to the phone. "You can absolutely be in the wedding, Maya. You're the most important person there, and we'll get you the fanciest dress you want. Victoria, you're going to be my real mom now." Victoria's eyes filled with tears again. "If that's okay with you." "It's the best thing ever," Maya repeated. "Wait until I tell Sarah. Her parents are going to be so jealous." After extracting promises to discuss wedding details when they got home, they let Maya go back to her sleepover. Ethan pocketed his phone and pulled Victoria closer, both of them staring into the fire. "Your parents are going to have thoughts about this," Ethan said. "My parents can keep their thoughts to themselves. This is happening with or without their blessing." "You sure about that?" "Absolutely sure. You and Maya are my family now. They'll either accept that or they won't, but it doesn't change anything." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the fire crackling, the lake lapping gently at the shore. Everything had come full circle, back to this dock where a joke had become the foundation of something real and lasting. "So," Victoria said eventually, "should we start planning or just enjoy being engaged for a while?" "What do you want?" "Honestly, I want to marry you as soon as possible. I don't need a big fancy wedding or months of planning. I just want to be your wife." Ethan's heart swelled. "How soon is soon?" "How about this summer? Something small, just the people we love, maybe here at the lake?" "Perfect. Absolutely perfect." They made plans late into the night, building the framework of their future around the fire that had witnessed their beginning. And when they finally went inside, climbing into the same bed where they'd spent their first weekend falling for each other, Ethan felt a peace he'd never known before. This was right. This was exactly where he was supposed to be, with exactly the right person, building exactly the life he'd never known he wanted. As he drifted off to sleep with Victoria in his arms and her grandmother's ring on her finger, Ethan sent a silent thank you to whatever force in the universe had made him brave enough to make that stupid joke proposal a year ago. It had been the best terrible idea of his life. The morning after the proposal, Ethan woke to find Victoria already awake, propped up on one elbow, watching him with a soft smile. Sunlight streamed through the bedroom windows, painting everything gold, and her left hand rested on his chest where she could admire the ring. "How long have you been awake?" he asked, his voice rough with sleep. "About an hour. I keep looking at this ring and thinking about how real this is. We're actually getting married. Having second thoughts?" "Not even for a second. You?" "The only thought I'm having is that I should have asked you months ago." She laughed and kissed him, sweet and slow, the kind of morning kiss that spoke of countless mornings to come. When they finally made their way downstairs, Victoria immediately grabbed her phone to start texting people while Ethan made coffee. "I'm telling Angela first," Victoria said, typing rapidly. "She's going to die. She's been predicting this since the lake trip. James is going to claim he orchestrated the whole thing by inviting me in the first place. He's not wrong, technically." The responses came flooding in almost immediately. Angela sent a string of celebration emojis followed by, "I knew it," James called within minutes, his voice booming through the speaker. "Ethan Cole, you magnificent bastard. You actually did it. We actually did it, Ethan corrected. It was a team effort. When's the wedding? Please tell me it's somewhere fancy. I want an excuse to rent a tuxedo. Summer probably, here at the lake. Nothing too fancy. The lake? That's perfect. Full circle, man. I love it. Victoria there? Victoria leaned toward the phone. I'm here, James. Congratulations, you two. Seriously. I've never seen Ethan this happy. You're good for him. After a dozen more calls and texts, they spent the rest of the weekend at the lake, walking the same paths they'd walked a year ago, talking about the future with the freedom of people who knew exactly where they were headed. They discussed the wedding in practical terms: guest list, timeline, whether to hire a planner or keep it simple and personal. I don't need a huge production, Victoria said as they sat on the dock Sunday morning. I spent years going to elaborate corporate events and they all blur together. I want something we'll actually remember. Something that feels like us. Us is good, Ethan agreed. Us is my favorite thing. The drive home Sunday afternoon was filled with comfortable silence and clasped hands, Victoria's ring catching the light whenever Ethan glanced over. Maya was waiting on Sarah's front porch when they pulled up, practically vibrating with excitement. Let me see the ring, she demanded before they'd even fully exited the truck. Victoria held out her hand and Maya examined it with the seriousness of a jeweler appraising a rare diamond. It's so pretty, and it's old-looking, like from a fairy tale. It is old, Ethan said. It belonged to someone who was married for a very long time. I thought that was good luck. Can I be a flower girl? Sarah was a flower girl at her cousin's wedding and she got to throw petals and everything. You can be whatever you want to be, Victoria said. You're the most important person at this wedding besides me and your dad. Maya threw her arms around Victoria's waist, squeezing tight. I'm so happy you're going to be my real mom. Over Maya's head, Victoria met Ethan's eyes, her own shimmering with emotion. This was what they were building. Not just a marriage between two people, but a family in every sense that mattered. The announcement to Victoria's parents came the following week, and it went exactly as poorly as expected. Patricia's voice through the phone was ice-cold with disapproval. You've known him less than a year, Victoria. This is incredibly rash. I've known him long enough to know he's the person I want to spend my life with. And his daughter? You're ready to become a stepmother? That's an enormous responsibility. I'm aware. Maya and I already have a wonderful relationship. I'm not going into this blindly. Richard got on the line, his tone slightly softer but no less concerned. Sweetheart, we just want to make sure you're protecting yourself. Financially, legally. Have you discussed a prenuptial agreement? Victoria's jaw tightened. We've discussed it, and we've decided against it. The silence on the other end was deafening. Victoria, Patricia finally said, please think about this carefully. You've worked so hard to build what you have. Don't throw it away on romance. I'm not throwing anything away. I'm gaining a family. And if you can't support that, then I'm sorry, but it doesn't change my decision. She hung up before they could respond, and Ethan pulled her into his arms as she fought back tears of frustration. They'll come around, he said, though he wasn't entirely convinced. Even if they don't, we're still doing this. Damn right we are. The wedding planning began in earnest, though planning was perhaps too formal a word for what they did. They reserved the same lake house for a long weekend in July, sent simple invitations to a small group of close friends and family, and let Maya take charge of choosing flowers from the grocery store website. Purple roses, she announced, and white ones too, and those fluffy things that look like clouds. Hydrangeas, Victoria supplied. Good choice. Victoria's company threw her an engagement party at her office, a surprise that her assistant Jennifer had coordinated with Ethan's help. Walking into the conference room transformed with decorations and finding all of Victoria's colleagues cheering had made her cry, which she insisted was completely unprofessional and also the nicest thing anyone had done for her. You've always been there for us, Jennifer said, raising a glass of champagne. Every late night, every crisis, every impossible deadline. It's about time someone was there for you in the same way. Ethan, you're a lucky man. Don't I know it, Ethan replied, his arm around Victoria's waist. One of Victoria's board members, an older woman named Catherine, pulled Ethan aside during the party. I want you to know something, she said. I've worked with Victoria for 5 years, and I've never seen her take a single personal day, never seen her leave early, Never seen her prioritize anything over this company. But the last few months, she's different, lighter. She smiles during meetings. She actually laughs at jokes instead of just acknowledging them. That's because of you. Ethan felt warmth spread through his chest. She's done the same for me. Made me remember there's more to life than just getting through each day. Then you're good for each other. That's rare. Don't take it for granted. I won't. As June rolled into July, the reality of the wedding started to feel immediate rather than abstract. They had final fittings for their outfits. Victoria had chosen a simple ivory dress that hit just below the knee, elegant but not traditional. Ethan had gotten a new suit, navy blue, that Maya insisted made him look like a prince. Maya's dress was predictably purple, with layers of tulle that made her twirl endlessly in front of every mirror. The Thursday before the wedding, Victoria's parents called again. This time, Richard's voice held a note of resignation rather than opposition. Your mother and I would like to attend, if you'll have us. Victoria's hand tightened on the phone. Really? We don't entirely approve of the timeline, Patricia added, her tone still stiff, but we recognize that this is your decision, and we'd rather be there than miss our daughter's wedding out of stubbornness. What changed your mind? There was a pause, then Richard spoke again. We had lunch with Catherine from your board. She told us some things about how you've been lately, how happy you seem, and your mother and I realized that maybe we've been so focused on protecting you that we forgot to consider whether you actually need protecting. It wasn't a full endorsement, but it was something. Victoria blinked back tears. I'd love for you to be there, both of you. It means a lot. After hanging up, she found Ethan in the backyard with Maya, helping her practice walking slowly while pretending to scatter flower petals. My parents are coming to the wedding, she announced. Ethan looked up in surprise. That's good, right? It's very good. Terrifying, but good. No more terrifying than the rest of this. She laughed. Fair point. Friday morning, they loaded the truck with suitcases and wedding clothes, Maya chattering nonstop about the weekend ahead. The drive to Lake Meridian felt different this time. Not nervous anticipation, but joyful certainty. They were returning to the place where everything had started, but this time they were coming as a family about to make themselves official. The house was already partially occupied when they arrived. James and Angela had driven up early to help with setup, and several other close friends were scattered across the property. Maya immediately ran off to find the other children, while Ethan and Victoria carried their bags inside. This is really happening, Victoria said, standing in the master bedroom where they'd gotten engaged just 3 months ago. Cold feet? Warm feet? Hot feet, even. I just can't believe we're actually here. The rehearsal dinner that evening was casual. Pizza on the back deck, children running wild across the lawn, adults sharing stories and laughter as the sun set over the lake. Victoria's parents arrived just as dinner was being served, and the tension was palpable as they greeted everyone. Patricia's handshake with Ethan was formal, but her eyes softened slightly when Maya ran up and hugged her spontaneously. You must be Victoria's mom. I'm Maya. I'm going to be the flower girl tomorrow, and my dress is purple, and it's so pretty, and I can't wait to show you. That sounds lovely, dear, Patricia said, clearly caught off guard by the enthusiastic greeting. Throughout dinner, Ethan watched Victoria's parents carefully observe the dynamics of their group. Richard seemed particularly interested in the way Victoria interacted with Maya, patient and affectionate, treating the child's endless questions with genuine attention rather than patronizing dismissal. Patricia watched Ethan, and while her expression remained guarded, some of the hardness around her eyes began to soften. After the children had been corralled into bed and the adults lingered around the fire pit with wine and beer, Richard approached Ethan. May I speak with you privately? Ethan's stomach tightened, but he nodded. They walked down to the dock, standing in the exact spot where Ethan had proposed twice, once as a joke, once for real. I owe you an apology, Richard said without preamble. I made assumptions about your character based on your financial situation and your circumstances. That was unfair and, frankly, beneath me. I understand why you'd be protective of Victoria. Understanding doesn't make it right. Richard looked out at the dark water. I built my wealth from nothing, came from a poor family, worked my way up, made something of myself. You'd think that would make me more sympathetic to people in similar situations, but instead it made me suspicious. I assumed everyone was looking for shortcuts, for someone to provide what they couldn't earn themselves. I'm not after Victoria's money, sir. I won't pretend the financial difference between us isn't significant, but that's not why I'm marrying her. I can see that now. I've been watching you tonight. The way you look at her, the way you are with your daughter, the way you interact with your friends. You're genuine. And more importantly, you make Victoria genuinely happy. He extended his hand. I'm sorry for making this harder than it needed to be. You have my blessing, for whatever that's worth. Ethan shook his hand, relieved and slightly stunned. It's worth a lot, actually, to both of us. Take care of her, not her money or her company. Those can take care of themselves. Take care of her heart. That's the only thing that matters. Every single day. I promise. When they returned to the fire, Victoria gave Ethan a questioning look. He smiled and nodded slightly, and her shoulders relaxed with visible relief. The night wound down slowly, people drifting off to their rooms until only Ethan and Victoria remained by the dying fire. Tomorrow, Victoria said softly. Tomorrow, we get married. Having any last-minute panic? None. You? Not even a little. He pulled her closer. I've never been more sure of anything. Good, because I'm not letting you back out now. I've already got the dress. They sat together watching the embers fade, neither wanting to leave this perfect moment. Eventually, Victoria stood and pulled Ethan to his feet. Come on, we should get some sleep. Tomorrow's kind of a big day. Kind of, he agreed with a grin. Saturday morning dawned clear and warm, perfect wedding weather. Ethan woke early, nerves and excitement making sleep impossible. He found James already awake in the kitchen, making coffee. The big day, James said, handing him a mug. You ready? More than ready? Is that weird? Shouldn't I be freaking out? Only if you're marrying the wrong person. You're not, so why freak out? The morning passed in a blur of activity. Angela took charge of decorating, transforming the backyard and dock into something magical with white fabric, flowers, and strings of lights that would glow once evening fell. The small group of guests, maybe 30 people total, began arriving around 3, and by 4 o'clock everything was in place. Ethan stood near the dock in his navy suit, James beside him as best man, watching people take their seats in the rows of white chairs they'd rented. His hands were shaking slightly, and he shoved them in his pockets to hide it. You good? James asked. I'm perfect. Terrified, but perfect. Victoria's parents sat in the front row, Patricia's expression carefully neutral but not hostile. That was progress. Beside them sat Angela and several of Victoria's colleagues, all of whom had watched her transformation over the past year with knowing smiles. The small quartet they'd hired began playing, and everyone turned to look toward the house. Maya appeared first, walking with exaggerated slowness, scattering purple and white petals with intense concentration. When she reached the front, she gave Ethan a huge grin and a thumbs up before taking her place. Then Victoria appeared, and Ethan forgot how to breathe. She walked alone, her choice, insisting she didn't need anyone to give her away because she was giving herself freely. Her ivory dress was simple but elegant, her dark hair loose around her shoulders, a small bouquet of purple and white roses in her hands. But it was her smile that undid him, radiant and certain and full of love. As she walked toward him, Ethan felt tears prick his eyes. This brilliant, successful, extraordinary woman had chosen him, had said yes to a joke proposal and meant it, had fought for them when it would have been easier to walk away, had built a life with him and his daughter and called it the best decision she'd ever made. When she reached him, she handed her bouquet to Angela and took both his hands. Hi, she whispered. Hi yourself. You look beautiful. You're crying. Happy tears, don't judge. The officiant, a friend of Victoria's from college, smiled at them both. Shall we begin? What followed was a ceremony that was both traditional and uniquely theirs. They'd written their own vows, and when it came time to speak them, Ethan had to clear his throat several times before he could begin. Victoria, a year ago you said yes to the craziest question I've ever asked. You took a leap of faith on a stranger with a kid and a very ordinary life. You could have dismissed it as a joke, walked away, forgot the whole thing. But you didn't. You chose to be brave instead of safe. And in doing that, you showed me how to be brave too. His voice cracked slightly. You've given me and Maya a family. You've shown me that love doesn't have to be careful or calculated, that sometimes the best things happen when you stop overthinking and just jump. You've made our small world bigger and our big dreams feel possible. I promise to choose you every single day, to show up when things are hard, to celebrate you when things are good, to be your partner in every sense of the word. I love you, and I can't wait to spend the rest of my life proving it. Victoria was crying now too, mascara be damned. When it was her turn, her voice was steady despite the tears. Ethan, when you asked me to marry you at that fire pit, I said yes because something in me recognized you. Recognized that you were real in a world where I'd forgotten what real felt like. And every day since then has confirmed what I knew in that moment, that you are the person I'm meant to build a life with. She squeezed his hands. You've taught me that success isn't measured in quarterly earnings or company valuation. It's measured in Saturday morning pancakes and homework help and showing up for soccer practice even when you're exhausted. You and Maya have given me a life that feels lived, not just achieved. And I promise to honor that, to never take for granted the gift of your ordinary, extraordinary life, to be Maya's mom in every way that matters, to be your wife, your partner, your person. I love you both so much, and I'm so grateful you took a chance on me. The officiant was wiping her own eyes. I think we can skip to the good part. Ethan, do you take Victoria to be your wife? I absolutely do. Victoria, do you take Ethan to be your husband? I do. I really, really do. Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you married. Kiss each other already. Ethan pulled Victoria close and kissed her as their small group of loved ones erupted in cheers. It was a kiss full of promise and joy and relief that they'd made it to this moment. When they finally broke apart, both grinning, Maya ran up and hugged them both. You're married now? We're a real family. Well, we've always been a real family, sweetheart, Victoria said, crouching down to Maya's level. But yeah, now it's official. The reception was exactly as they'd envisioned, casual and warm, with good food and better company. They'd set up tables on the lawn, and as the sun set and the string lights came on, everything took on a magical quality. Victoria's father gave a toast that was surprisingly emotional, admitting that he'd been wrong about Ethan and that he'd never seen his daughter happier. Patricia didn't speak, but she hugged Victoria tightly before dinner and whispered something that made Victoria cry again. When it was James's turn to toast, he stood with a huge grin. I'm taking full credit for this, just so we're clear. If I hadn't dragged Ethan to this lake house a year ago, none of this would have happened. So really, you're all welcome. The laughter was immediate and genuine. But seriously, James continued, I've known Ethan for years, and I've never seen him as happy as he's been since Victoria came into his life. And Victoria, I may not know you as well, but I know that you make my friend smile in a way I didn't think was possible. So here's to taking chances on strangers, to saying yes to jokes that turn serious, and to building a life together. Congratulations, you crazy kids. As the evening wore on, people danced on the lawn to music from someone's iPhone playlist. Children ran wild in the darkness, and Ethan and Victoria sat together watching it all unfold. This is perfect, Victoria said, her head on his shoulder. This is exactly what I wanted. No regrets about not having a big fancy wedding? Not even one. This is real. This is us. Why would I want anything else? Around 10 o'clock, after Maya had fallen asleep on a blanket under the stars and been carried to bed by Angela, after the older guests had said their goodbyes and headed to their rooms, after the music had faded to a soft background hum, Ethan and Victoria found themselves alone on the dock. The same dock where he'd jokingly proposed. The same dock where he'd seriously proposed. Now they stood there as husband and wife, the culmination of a year-long journey that had started with 7 impossible words. I've been waiting for someone brave enough to ask, Ethan said softly, echoing her words from that first night. Victoria smiled. And I've been waiting for someone brave enough to mean it. They stood together looking out at the dark water, the reflection of the moon creating a silver path across the surface. Behind them, the house glowed warm with light and lingering celebration. Above them, stars scattered across the clear summer sky. Around them, the quiet sounds of the lake, water lapping at posts, night birds calling, the distant hum of insects. What are you thinking about? Victoria asked. How none of this should have worked. On paper, we're completely wrong for each other, Different worlds, different lives, everything stacked against us. But here we are anyway, married, building a family, proving that sometimes the best things don't make sense until you're brave enough to try. Victoria turned to face him, her hands finding his in the darkness. You know what I think? What? I think that night when you asked me to marry you as a joke, some part of both of us knew it wasn't really a joke. We just needed time to catch up to what our hearts already understood. That's very philosophical for someone who deals in numbers and profit margins. I contain multitudes. You should know that by now, Mr. Cole. Mrs. Hale Cole, he corrected, using the hyphenated name they'd decided on together. Or are you keeping Hale for business? Hale Cole for everything. We're a package deal now. You, me, and Maya, the Hale Cole family. Ethan pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. I love you, in case I haven't mentioned it in the last hour. I love you too. And I know I said this in my vows, but thank you. For being brave enough to make that stupid joke. For being brave enough to give me a chance. For being brave enough to build this life with me even when it was scary and uncertain. Thank you for saying yes. Both times. They stood there for a long time holding each other, listening to the lake. Eventually, they'd have to go inside, start their honeymoon, begin the practical business of merging their lives officially. But for now, they simply existed in this perfect moment. Two people who'd taken an impossible chance and turned it into something beautiful. Back at the house, through the window of Maya's room, a small purple dress hung on the closet door, flower petals still scattered in the pockets. In the master bedroom, wedding clothes lay carefully across a chair, waiting to be packed away and preserved. In the kitchen, a half-eaten wedding cake sat under plastic wrap, too delicious to waste. Throughout the house, the evidence of celebration remained. Champagne glasses, scattered flower petals, forgotten shoes, the remnants of a day that would be remembered forever. And outside on the dock, Ethan and Victoria Hale Cole stood together under the stars, holding hands and dreaming of the future they would build together. A future full of soccer games and board meetings, homework help and business trips, family dinners and date nights, ordinary moments and extraordinary love. Ready to go inside? Ethan finally asked. Ready to start forever, Victoria replied. They walked back up the dock hand in hand, their shadows merging into one in the moonlight. The lake house lights welcomed them home, and somewhere in the distance, the water continued its eternal rhythm against the shore. What had started as a joke between strangers had become the most real thing in both their lives. A single father and a CEO, brought together by a moment of absurdity and kept together by choice, courage, and love. And as they climbed the stairs to their room, leaving behind the dock where everything had started, they carried with them the certainty that sometimes the best answers in life begin with the bravest questions, even the ones you ask as a joke, especially those ones.